call the April 12th, 2021 West Sacramento Environment and Utilities Commission meeting to order. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N 2920, members of the Environment and Utilities Commission and staff are meeting via teleconference to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Members of the public have been invited to watch the meeting via web cable channel 20 or streaming online through the city's website. Tonight's agenda and all agenda item materials are available on the city's website on the Environment and Utilities Commission page. All public comments submitted by 5 p.m. via email to the Environment and Utilities clerk are available for consideration and are posted to the city website, along with any agenda and a link to the live streaming video, so that all community members and commissioners can see the complete text and submittal information. And then that is all I have for our intro. So our first general administration function, part 1, is the swearing in of the Environment and Utilities Commission members.
So I will lead that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a statement and have you guys repeat it. That way we can all have you guys raise your right hand. Get ready for the process. I, Dana
Cordano,
and I need everybody to repeat, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Do solemnly
swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies.
And the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
Truth, faith, and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I will bear allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California.
Full faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States California,
and the Constitution of California.
Yes.
That I will take this obligation freely.
I take this obligation
freely.
Without any mental reservations.
Without
any mental reservations.
Purpose of evasion.
For purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties.
Upon which I am about to enter.
Upon which I am about to enter.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ben, does it matter that some people were muted? I could see their lips muting, but it wasn't recorded. Does that matter?
We would prefer that they weren't muted, but I mean, as long as we can see that they're reciting it.
Yeah, okay. I just noticed some people were muted when they were reciting the oath, so.
It would be tough to record all of us saying it at the
same time. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely like weird. All right, so election of the Environment and Utilities Commission Chair and Vice Chair for 2021. Do we have any nominations for Chair and Vice Chair? I will nominate myself for Chair, since I know we have a lot of new commission members here. So.
Yeah, I just thought you were remaining Chair for some reason.
No, it's okay.
I think that's a good idea.
Do we have a nomination for Vice Chair?
I'd be happy to nominate myself for Vice Chair.
So
at the pleasure of the other commissioners.
To get through the chair first, because we're gonna have to vote on it. So it looked like Commissioner Solano had a motion, and we're looking for a second.
Second.
Dana.
And then okay, so it's so there we motioned and seconded that Dana Cordano for chair. Does everybody agree, or?
Aye.
Agree.
You guys agree?
Yes.
Agree.
So we're gonna have to do a roll call vote.
Okay.
Commissioner Blondo, if I say your name wrong, please correct me.
Yes.
Solorio.
Oh.
Oh, Blondo. I'm not sure. Sorry.
I, yes, whatever.
Commissioner Solorio,
Aye.
Commissioner Criswell,
Aye.
Commissioner Green,
Aye.
Commissioner Choi,
Aye.
Commissioner Ciano,
Aye. It's Chelino.
Polino, and Chair Cordano.
Aye.
All right, so now we can move on to Vice Chair.
Okay, sorry. Do we have a nomination for vice chair?
Commissioner
Aye.
Chelano.
Yeah, I'm happy to nominate myself. Thank you.
I will second.
Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote again?
Who was our motion? Who was our second?
The motion was Commissioner Choi and the second was Commissioner Blondo.
Okay, we'll do roll call. Commissioner Criswell,
Aye.
Commissioner Green,
Aye.
Commissioner Choi,
Aye.
Commissioner Solano,
Solorio.
Solorio. No, no,
Okay.
Solano.
Who's that? Oh, Chelino.
Polino.
Aye.
Commissioner Blondo,
Aye.
Commissioner Solerno,
I think that's me. Solorio. Aye.
and Commissioner Cordano.
That's okay. Aye. All right. Well, great. All right, thank you, everybody.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, yeah. All right. Presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. Do we have any presentations? No?
There's no public comment at this time.
Okay. And then disclosure of ex parte communications. So any commissioners should disclose any communications they have had on the agenda items at this time. Okay, none. I'm going to say silence is none. So, all right. Consent agenda. The consideration of the approval of minutes of the December 14th, 2020 Environment and Utilities Commission meeting. We have a motion to approve the minutes or any corrections.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, second. Commissioner Kurzweil, it's going to have to be you.
Second.
Okay. All right. So we had Commissioner Green motioned and Commissioner Kurzweil seconded.
Commissioner Choi?
Are we going to do roll call vote?
Yeah, we have to do a roll call.
Okay.
I have a
Aye.
question. I have a question first.
Yeah.
If we weren't here, I can't vouch for the correctness. Could I just abstain or what's the protocol?
Yeah, you can abstain.
Thank you.
Commissioner Choi?
Aye.
Commissioner Silano? I am just destroying this name.
It's Chelino.
Polino.
I'll abstain as well.
Commissioner Blondo?
Abstain.
Commissioner Solorio?
Yeah, is it? I think I need to abstain also.
Commissioner Criswell?
Yes.
Commissioner Green?
Aye.
Chair Cordano.
It was close. That was good. Aye. All right. So we're going to move on to a regular agenda. We have a presentation on the climate action plan.
And Ben, we have a PowerPoint for this item.
Seamus, whenever you're ready.
All right. Seamus Laffey, Associate Planner in the city's Planning Division. And I'll wait for the slides to come up here, unless they're already, I don't see them up.
We're only seeing your desktop, Ben.
Is that better?
Much better.
There we go. All right, so climate action plan update. Next slide. So good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. The purpose of this item before you tonight is to update you on the status of the city's update to the Climate Action Plan, also referred to as the CAP. The city and the city's consultant, AECOM, began work on this update a little over a year ago, and to anticipate a draft document being brought before you later this year. To start off, the Climate Action Plan serves as the community's roadmap to reduce the effects of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and also improving the community's ability to adapt to climate change. The CAP demonstrates the city's commitment to addressing climate change and its impacts that are already being felt locally, including extended heat waves, worsening outdoor air quality from wildfires, flood risk, and energy reliability issues. The CAP will include a series of local strategies designed with input from residents, businesses, and elected officials that, when implemented, will reduce the community's GHG emissions and demonstrate how West Sacramento is doing its best part to face the global challenge that is climate change. The CAP builds upon the city's general plan, which is a long-term planning document, as well as other plans, and also builds upon a lot of the existing efforts already underway, some of which are noted in the agenda report. The Climate Action Plan will help with CEQA streamlining, and that's the California Environmental Quality Act, for projects to show that the city is also meeting the state GHG reduction targets. SB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, requires a reduction to GHG emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. And more recently, the previous governor signed Executive Order B-55-18, that was 2018, for the state of California to be carbon neutral by 2045. So given the scale of this issue, the mayor of Sacramento and previous mayor of West Sacramento recognized the need to take action and lead the mayor's commission on climate change. That commission adopted their final report last summer, and then next slide. And it recommends implementation measures to reduce GHG emissions that get to carbon neutral by 2045. Many of those recommendations will likely be included in this climate action plan. And Mr. Tilley was the city staff liaison for this effort and will provide additional information on it after I conclude my report. So one of the first steps, next slide, Ben. One of the first steps for developing the climate action plan is to establish the baseline year, baseline inventory, and our climate action plan uses 2018 as the baseline year. This year will be used for measuring future reductions, and the slide on the screen shows the GHG inventory by emission sector for 2018. And as you can see, buildings and on-road vehicles account for a majority of the emissions in the city. So you can see here, on-road vehicles, that accounts for 58%, commercial buildings 18%, and residential buildings 12%. That's a fairly substantial portion of the city's GHG emissions. So as you can see from where the emissions inventory and the GHG reduction targets, there's a lot of tough choices that will need to be made going forward on how to reduce GHG emissions. Next slide, Ben. So this concludes what we have so far in the climate action plan. Our consultant is preparing the whole draft right now. And as I mentioned before, that'll be probably completed this summer or fall and would return back to the various commissions for your recommendation for approval. A few important workshops that we have coming up. We have a community workshop next week on the 20th at 6 o'clock. And you can register on the city's climate action plan website. That is a workshop that it's with the Delta Stewardship Council. And we will also have a survey on the city's climate page in the next few days. And that link is at the very bottom of this screen, citywestsacramento.org/climate. And then we also have an Earth Day event this Saturday at 10 a.m. and you can register there at recyclingfund.org. So a lot of events related to the CAP coming up. This is all on the city's website, on the climate page, and also the city's social media has been broadcasting it out. And if for whatever reason you can't write this all down right now, feel free to email any of us city staff and we can get this information for you. And it'll also be, this is being recorded, so it'll be on the city website. So this concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Tilley to go into more detail on the mayor's climate change commission recommendations.
So thank you, Seamus. So again, my name is David Tilley. I'm the principal planner in the city's community development department, and I'm co-managing the CAP work along with your primary staff contact, Paulina. The Mayor's Commission work, which was a joint effort between Sacramento and West Sacramento, was a pretty monumental effort in terms of talking about climate matters on a more or less on a regional scale. It was supposed to start out as a 6-month process and end up being 18 months because of the depth of the materials and also what we learned along the way, principally in the matter of equity. So the Mayor's Commission, which was comprised of 17 members from sort of all walks of life, electeds, building industry folks, community-based organizations, utility providers, really across the board, really worked hard to come up with the final recommendations that are in the report. And I believe we attached that final report to your packet this evening. Our direction when that process first started was to use that as a basis to inform our own CAP update, and that is what we are now doing. The Mayor's Commission at the very beginning was challenged by then Mayor Gamaldin and still current Mayor Steinberg to be bold and aggressive. And that's what that commission did and what its recommendations reflect. There is a lot of math behind all of those to help get us to carbon neutrality by 2045. And they looked at emissions and from the different sectors on a more broad scale, similarly to what we have done with our own emissions inventory here in West Sacramento. So I anticipate that many of these recommendations we will be formalizing and bringing before your commission later this year, prior to them going to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the City Council. Many of those in there, particularly on the mobility sector, which is the largest sector of emissions in our region, will really represent what I'll call paradigm shifts, sort of inverting the way people travel in terms of the different modes from what it is now to what it needs to be in the future. This is about trips, 30 and 40% of trips by biking, walking, rolling, transit, etc. Right now, those are about 2% of trips. Just try to give it a bit of context and scale for that. So these are big lifts, and that's what we are working on, putting these together. But also as part of our climate work, we're recognizing that the city is doing a lot of things in this particular arena already, as are many of our residents and businesses. So one of the things you'll be seeing in our CAP is some vignettes, if you will, or what we're calling climate champions. These will be real world stories from local businesses and residents who have done X, Y, or Z when it relates to trying to reduce emissions, and with the hope that others may be able to emulate some of those. But the most foundational underlying theme, though, what we were working on with our climate action plan and what the Mayor's Commission was all about was the notion of equity. You can't talk about climate without talking about equity, and vice versa. We learned a lot through that process, and there were some missteps, I think, in the beginning, until some of the notions of equity were sort of brought into the forefront and folks started to understand what that means. Obviously, there's folks out there with all ranges of values and beliefs and income levels and abilities, and we have to be conscious of that. Not everyone can drive a Tesla. Not everyone can put solar on their roof or do this or do that. But there is a whole suite of options that are available for individuals to where there should be something that almost anyone can do. And we really want to be mindful of equity matters as we go through our climate. And we also want to be mindful of trying to incentivize things as much as possible, and not try to just be purely regulatory and mandates. There will be some on both sides of that, but the goal is to incentivize things as much as possible. For us to be successful in our efforts on climate here in West Sacramento, we're going to need maximum community buy-in on those things and maximum community understanding. So that's partially why we want to bring this for you tonight, to at least start the dialogue with your commission, knowing that we will need to be back once we have the full climate action plan ready for you. But we want to encourage everyone to be thinking about some of these matters along the way, and help inform what we are working on, especially as your commission, as all commissions are meant to be a proxy for the community as a whole. So with that, I think I'll close my remarks. Paulina, I don't know if you want to add anything in, but otherwise, Seamus and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have anything. You guys both covered where we are. So perfect.
Good.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned the community workshops, or if there were community workshops in the past, is there a way to find the output or the notes or whatever came out of those workshops?
The Mayor's Commission, the Mayor's Commission work had numerous workshops that were well documented as part of their overall. I believe what I sent you was sort of more of the summary document. That's all on Local Government Commission's website, lgc.org, I believe it is. So there was extensive outreach on that, and they even formed certain subcommittees for outreach. And then for our efforts, we actually have an outreach specialist as part of our team who is helping us try to reach those parts of our community that are traditionally hard to reach because of language or other cultural barriers, things of that nature. So that's a big point of emphasis for us, because we really need to get to everyone, especially those who are most vulnerable.
Sorry, and that April 20th workshop, is that part of that plan?
That is something that the city is partnering on with the Delta Stewardship Council. The Delta Stewardship Council has prepared what they call a vulnerability assessment for the entire Delta. Most of our city is in the secondary zone of the Delta, and they have identified a disadvantaged community in our city. So as part of their efforts, they have the responsibility to go out to that community. And so we are sort of piggybacking with them on that with our own climate work, since both topics are interrelated. And that meeting is open to anyone who wishes to attend.
What is the focus, and what are you trying to get out of that meeting on the 20th?
Well, the Delta Stewardship Council is going to float some of its potential adaptation strategies to various climate stressors. Heat being, I think, probably the most obvious one, especially on a day like today when it was already 85 and mid-April. But the goal really, and then also for us, we will be, floating some of our draft strategies to reduce emissions out there while nothing is set in stone yet, to try to get some feedback about their feasibility and whether or not folks think they will be effective, especially to some of our most vulnerable residents who are already being disproportionately impacted from climate stressors.
Just a comment. Thank you both for the presentation. I think it's a really opportune time. Really excited for us to get the draft report once it's ready. Obviously, not rushing you, but I think with some of the conversations at the federal level related to infrastructure funding and climate, there's also conversations happening at the state level related to a climate bond that might go before the voters in 2022. So that money wouldn't actually be available until probably 2023. But there's opportunities, and I think if the city can have this update ready to go, that there will be good ways to implement some of the recommendations that are in there if they require funding commitments.
Well, they absolutely will. There's no doubt about that. But for COVID, we would have been a little further along, than where we are now. But we are, moving full speed ahead on this. I agree with you that, the opportunity, the timing of this for once is good. That there does appear to be momentum in this, particular arena. And so we really want to cash in on that. And we're hoping we can be a leader in this particular space in our region and hopefully statewide. And other communities, Sacramento, for example, which was part of that, is already doing a lot of good things in advancing initiatives, like building electrification was one of the fundamental recommendations of the Mayor's Commission report. And that's the one they're leading with, right out of the chute. And they're definitely getting some pushback on it, as expected, but they're plowing through it, regardless. And we will need to do similar kinds of things.
Can you speak on the plans or current kind of draft recommendations in the multimodal pedestrian infrastructure improvements that will probably be needed, since the transportation is the largest contributing sector here? I would think that that sector may require the most funding and infrastructure to give opportunities and give options to get out of the car, kind of thing. Even simple things like safety lanes for all these different types of transportation.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. That's the biggest slice of the emissions pie. It's a little more than half. So that's where we hopefully have the most opportunity to make meaningful improvements in this regard. And sort of in my view, as we're sorting this stuff out, I believe we're really going to need to be prioritizing, walking and biking and the infrastructure associated with it. And that may come very much at the expense of cars. I could visualize more road diets potentially. We absolutely have to have, we still have a lot of neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. We absolutely need to be working on that front. We will need, and there will likely be funding trade-offs that we will have to, consider, and ultimately with the city council about trying to, put maybe more money toward VIA and maybe less money toward more roads. There's going to be some trade-offs there without a doubt, and I don't envy the council to having to make some of these tough decisions. But I guess, I just consider, well, doing nothing is not an option, either. So we will need to have a robust discussion about these matters and to, try to get as many people on board as possible to recognize that, we have a big problem on our hands and we're going to have to do things differently if we're going to, try to solve this problem. But we don't have all the answers yet, but we're working on it.
I have a question. So is this plan, like once it's finalized, is it kind of fixed or is it dynamic? And the reason I ask this is because I know that, employers are starting with COVID-19 have found successful telework. So that kind of shifts the problem from being maybe transportation to, like the electrical grid, gas, that kind of stuff. So is there like caveats within the plan to like reevaluate it every so often to make sure that it's still meeting the current needs? Because it does sound like, there's gonna, I work for the state and they're even talking about doing some sort of portion of like telework and things like that, which would just kind of shift those issues, I would say, more than solve them. So.
Oh, it absolutely needs to be a living, breathing, working document. We will need to be reporting on our efforts and trying to make sure that the emissions reductions that we are expecting are actually happening, in the real world based on, if we decide, we're going to switch all the city fleet over to electric vehicles or something like that. Well, we're going to need to account for, that net difference in emissions. And if it's not getting us to what our goal is, that we're going to have to try different things. So this can't be a plan that sits on the shelf and 20 years from now, we crack it open and see if it worked. This is why we've deliberately kept it as a standalone document outside of the general plan so that it can be updated much more frequently and frankly, much less laboriously than it is, with the general plan. The general plan has policies in there and that sort of sets the foundation, but the climate action plan is an implementation document. We don't need policy anymore. We need implementation. And so that's what this plan is for. And so it does need to be living, breathing, and, get the pages dog-eared and yellowed, all of that from a lot of use. We have too many plans that sit on the shelf. This is implementation. You brought up teleworking. That's the big wild card that's been thrown at us since COVID. I'd be curious if anyone has any input about whether or not people think that's going to become more the norm, or one of these days we're just going to flip the switch and go back to where we were, because that has a big impact on this. If there's less commuting than there has been, traditionally. And so I know you made Chair Cordon, you made a reference to that. I'm curious what you were driving at.
Yeah, you might need to really consider it. I know, like I work for the state of California, and they've really been talking about, telework in itself has saved the state a lot of money, especially on like properties and things like that. And so there've been a lot of like open discussions about there being partial telework for state employees as a permanent fixture. And some divisions and departments might be, and boards might be permanent. So it just depends on where you're at. So it could be a big impact, especially in this area, considering the amount of state employees within this area.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. That could be huge for our region, if it sticks. And so
that was one reason I asked about like the shifting load, because then if you have the people on telework, now you have more people on the grid. And so it's like important to have that, knowing our utility companies are honoring, are part of this. I know that part of the larger discussion, you had like SMUD and PG&E in it. So, but, it's really important to have them in on that, because they're going to be a big part of that. If, a big chunk of people within West Sacramento and Sacramento areas start teleworking 1 to 4 to 5 days a week, so.
Oh, absolutely. And, but for this, I think we'd be missing a golden opportunity if we didn't learn something from this whole pandemic effort and how we all had to live life differently, seemingly just overnight. And for what was supposed to be a month, we're into it now about 14 months, something to that effect. So we will learning for things. And this is the big question out there is, will teleworking become much more common and done enough to where it could have make a measurable difference of at least that many less cars on the road.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it, to be honest. I'm experiencing the same thing. Really early on in the pandemic, working for the state, our commission just really jumped on the opportunity to make the teleworking stick as much as possible, because it was kind of that almost undoable experiment that how could you back when, before COVID, say, hey, we've got this idea, we're going to try this, everybody start working from home. Nobody could really do that. But since we were pushed into it, the success areas became known, and there are I guess a good amount of success. The productivity that's been able to maintain and in some cases increase for different reasons, for different departments, different parts of agencies. So yeah, I have zero doubts that it's the new norm. To what degree is the question? And definitely having to take into consideration that load shift or the emissions shift because of the load shift. And with that, I kind of wanted to, I guess, loop back to the question about it being a living document. Has there been any indication from council that this report would have a regular, consistent update? There's reports that we do at our agency, the integrated energy assessments report, that it's standard. It gets an update every other year, and then it gets a full new version every 2 years. So it's constantly kind of being looked at and updated. So it just seems like that would happen with this, because it always will be something that has to be updated.
Yeah, no, we will need to build in a program like that. But I think what's going to drive the updates is whether or not the measures are being effective or not. Once we, do that reporting on, if we add new solar, if we convert more lights to LED, if we start moving to like renewable natural gas fueled, off-road vehicles, there's a whole laundry list of things that we could potentially do for city operations, that where we can get, direct data. So,
right. So you've got your baseline. Yeah. So we'll have our baseline, and then you're constantly measuring and reporting in. So is it going to be like annually or biannually that, you put out the formal update and to see what's working, what's not working, and then you kind of reassess it.
Yeah, I think we're in that range of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
We'll certainly do the math on an annual basis and see if we are getting to if we're on track to get to where we need to get, and if not, then we'll need to change course. At that point. And I ask about the teleworking. That's the big wild card out there. Teleworking will absolutely be one of the planks, in the CAT. It's a matter of how much do we assume that will occur, and then I think some of the points around it were spot on about, that may take some cars off the road, but it may, then put more stress on the energy grid. Mm-hmm. So that's where then that brings in the intersection of solar and battery storage, but those things also remain, rather expensive still. So this is a very dynamic and exciting topic. And I'm glad we're able to start the dialogue with your commission this evening. We'll definitely be back, and we'll need to hit a couple of the other commissions too before we ultimately get to council.
David, is your office considered connecting with folks at DGS to get a pulse on kind of what the entire region or state it has in the works, because I would think that they might be in the know for all the leases. And if they don't, it could be a little nudge that, you know, that they kind of start tracking it. I imagine that they would want to already, but if it's not there, you know, they could hear that it's wanted.
That's a
so
good
they
idea,
can
actually.
report back. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about DGS, but in our region, you know, that's the big driver of things around here is, you know, state operations.
Yeah, I
So-
imagine they're putting something together.
And
Yeah.
Cal HR also is the other office that you probably want to contact, because I know that they just sent out, you know, like a notification saying, hey, you know, if offices want to keep teleworking, you know, make a plan or something like that. So that would be an office that you would want to contact also. So DGS and Cal HR would probably be the two main ones. Yeah.
No, that's very good feedback. Thank you.
You know, I'm wondering if there's a survey, because I work for UC Davis, and I know there's a lot of UC Davis people who couldn't afford Davis, so they're in West Sac. So it helps in two ways. One is the telecommute option, but the transportation, because previously I'd mentioned that it would be nice if I could take an easy public transport to the university, and they had plans between the medical center and the campus, and it's like, hey, can you just make a stop in West Sac? And that would be great, because it would stop almost like 2 blocks from West Sac in Sacramento, but not in West Sac, anywhere where I could take via. So those are opportunities, I think, if, and I'm wondering with the data, it would be tougher, I guess. You'd have to find it somewhere where it says, where are people working? One, and the people are working here in various businesses here, where are they living? Because that gets your transportation view completely. At least for the commuters.
Yeah, no, that's a key point here. We're really, you know, out of whack when it comes to where our residents work versus where employees of our businesses live. At least prior to COVID, we were exporting about 90% of our white collar workers to other places. That's a problem because all that's doing is inducing DMT. So, you know, I've stressed some of our economic development strategy is if we can land companies here that can employ our residents, that's not only just good for, you know, economics, but, you know, hopefully they can, you know, shave some miles off their trips. And then it's hopefully more feasible to, you know, get them on, you know, Yola bus or via, you know, one of the other, you know, services out there. So all these things are interrelated, and we're, you know, finally starting to get a handle on some of those, you know, those dynamics. And then conversely, if our housing remains expensive, you know, many of our employers are not, you know, paying the kind of wages that put you in a $500,000 house. So those folks are having to move further and further out to find affordable housing, and then they have to turn around and drive back. That's not good for them, and it's certainly not good for climate.
I have a question about the workshop coming up with the Delta Stewardship. Does your office have any other future community workshops planned for information output and intake?
Yeah, we will do more. This is sort of the first one out of the chute, since you know, the Delta Stewardship Council was going to be doing something on their own anyway. We've sort of partnered with them, and then we will absolutely be doing more of our own on this, more focused, you know, over the summer months, and you know, as we start to, you know, crystallize things.
So it's for comment on the draft?
Yeah, ultimately we will have the draft up for comment. We'll probably do one more workshop before the draft is released. You know, we're trying to get folks enough for something to chew on, but also still have you know, flexibility to pivot, you know, based on some of that feedback, you know, that we get you know, along the way.
And did I hear you right that you were saying the fall is when you're thinking the plan is going to be finalized?
Yeah, I would hope so at this point. I would hope that, now that we're really moving full speed on this, and seems like, COVID is starting to lessen its grip on us a little bit, makes things a little more feasible to do. So I would hope that by fall we could, have a plan ready for council's, action.
And I just have one more question, and then that's it. You mentioned, in the kind of in the line of equity, and how not everybody has access to all of the solutions. And and you specifically said not everybody can get solar on their roofs. And that reminded me of something I was thinking about when twice vendors have come knocking on my door in the past probably month or month and a half. I don't know if any have come to any of your homes, and they're talking about specific recent legislation. I don't know how recent, maybe a year, maybe 6 months, but I don't have that legislation specifically. I need to do some research unless somebody here knows. But some legislation was passed where I think that the utilities are either paying for solar installations on residents that let me see, they are eligible, or I'm not sure who's paying for it, but they were saying it's basically free to the homeowner, and because of the legislation, it cannot be charged for. So I thought that was really interesting, and it has to do with tying back in, obviously, to the grid, that they would obviously be able to harvest any excess. But it's an interesting thing, and I think would be really worthwhile looking into. And I had planned on looking into that legislation, kind of asking around at work. But if this is the case, and this is something that is widely available now, the city may be able to partner with some of the vendors, maybe, if there's not a conflict there, and just take advantage of this.
No, we will absolutely look into that. That's it. That solar remains challenging, and quite frankly, being on PG&E versus SMUD definitely puts us at a bit of a disadvantage. That's why one of the primary recommendations of the Mayor's Commission report was to support West Sacramento moving to a more climate-friendly utility. I believe that's the language, that was in that report. That was actually something requested by Councilman Ledesma, who was the city's representative on that commission. Because quite frankly, if you look at the incentives and rebates and other things side by side, SMUD has a long laundry list of things. And I was just looking at PG&E's website the other day, and there's like only 2 or 3 things they do for residents. And they're fairly minor in the overall scheme of things. They're probably not moving the needle very much. So we absolutely need to be looking into legislation that, such as what you brought out, to try to help our most vulnerable residents be able to get those solar put in for their own benefit, but then that takes hopefully a little pressure off the grid and sort of benefits everyone in a way.
Has the city had any discussions about community choice aggregation as a provider?
Yes, we did join Valley Clean Energy as an associate member because at that time, Valley Clean Energy was attempting to purchase PG&E's assets within that defined area. Once it became clear that that type of acquisition was not likely to occur, we did withdraw from Valley Clean Energy. They created a separate membership class so that we could be at the table, but not necessarily jump on board, because that was all about acquiring PG&E's assets. That doesn't appear to be occurring. So I imagine we are sort of shifting gears from that. And we may be looking at other alternatives, in the region. West Sacramento is a wonderful place, and I feel like our location is like a blessing and a curse in a way, because we are here in Yolo County, and Yolo County is wonderful. But in day-to-day life, we're much more part of the Sacramento world, than the rest of the county. This was something I really had to harp on a lot during the mayor's commission work is, everyone on there was, SMUD this and SMUD that. And I'm like, hey, we're a PG&E over here. It's a totally different animal. So,
yeah, but the community choice aggregate could be very possibly, I don't know a lot about it, but I just feel what I've heard is that it could be an even more beneficial route than even SMUD.
And it's certainly not something that's we've foreclosed on that idea 100%. But we did, at least dip our toe in that pond over the last, year and a half. That didn't bear fruit then, but perhaps it could in the future.
Any more questions?
I just had, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner Green. I already spoke earlier.
Oh, no. I just had a quick comment and a suggestion for the city's consideration. I just wanted to thank you both for the update as well. And I very much appreciated the materials that were provided as part of our agenda packet, particularly the FAQs. It looks like they were developed maybe in late February of this year. I think that's super helpful because I know that there's a educational component to this effort as we look to move forward with, community outreach and stakeholder engagements and the like. I particularly appreciated items 9 and 10 when you guys kind of looked at that intersection between COVID and the CAP and how that's influenced our roadmap and just underscoring how people can get involved. I think that's wonderful. And then my suggestion is perhaps the city could entertain developing a glossary of terms as kind of an addendum to this document for folks who maybe aren't so familiar with some of these terms. Like I was looking through the materials and in the emissions subsector, there's the fugitive emissions listed there. And I had to look that up for my own benefit, just so I was clear on what that represented. So I thought maybe a glossary of terms could possibly be helpful. Again, considering that we're looking to get input from stakeholders in the community and so on and so forth. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, I was wondering if the plan or any of the sort of communications materials that might be given out within the community or hopefully are online rather than printed would be available in any additional languages other than English.
Yeah, we certainly have the ability to do some translation both into other languages, but I think also as Commissioner Green suggested, even within English, trying to make some of these things a lot more accessible to folks. It's imperative that we get that understanding across. So we will make various documents available in different languages and formats.
I have a question on the electrification proposal or suggestion, and this is back to the emphasis of being bold. Why did it stop short of saying that, hey, all these buildings should have solar, new buildings should have solar? Because one of the things that I've seen, at least close to where I live, is new construction, like an Amazon center, lots of roof space, and they could put solar across the whole bunch, as the post office did down the road, and generate power, or at least reduce their consumption.
Well, there were compromises and trade-offs, in there. For new, there's two categories. There's new construction, and then there's existing, buildings. A little easier to mandate that through various means on new construction, literally when you're building something from scratch. But that it can't all just be on new development. The building code is already moving in that direction, as it is. Most of our major businesses have started to put solar on. I mean, even IKEA, not only do they put a massive array on their building, they're about to put a whole bunch of stuff even in their parking lot, right now as an example. The more challenging side of the equation, though, is existing buildings, because by our horizon year, about 75% of existing buildings today will still be here. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges, and I don't think we've 100% figured it out yet, is how to get that existing building stock to electrify and go solar. That brings in some of the equity pieces, but with that much building stock still happening, we can't just put it all on new development either. So that's where the incentives become very critical. And, that's something where, quite frankly, SMUD really shines on that. Other utilities, not as much. So this is where, we could probably face some of our biggest hurdles is how do we help existing buildings electrify, residential and commercial, especially challenging in certain commercial applications like restaurants, for example, to do all electric in most restaurants is going to be very challenging. But if we can get it on other buildings, offices, warehouses, and other things, which tend to be much larger than your average restaurant, maybe that's enough. So these are the things we're working on, and others as well in the region.
David, just to, I guess, maybe emphasize, and Commissioner Blondo, if I have this wrong, please correct me, but maybe to emphasize what I thought I was hearing from him, is it, yes, existing buildings, but why not new build? Was I hearing you that the city is not mandating on new builds solar, and why? Is that the question?
Well, I think it was answered.
Not yet.
David clarified it. It said the building codes are heading in that direction anyway.
Yes.
It does not need to be in this document. It will head there by the state or whatever other mechanisms. And then the other issue is those building codes won't apply to old buildings. And what do we do? So in essence, new buildings will move in that direction. So it's a matter of how many buildings are built in between. And then the incentives for old buildings. Some of them are very new. So that's the issue of what are the incentives given we are PG&E rather than SMUD, and the incentives may not be as great, at least financially, for a commercial entity.
Yeah, that's sort of the other side of the coin here is one of the upsides, at least, of being on PG&E for commercial businesses is their rates are so much higher than SMUD. That ought to be an incentive in and of itself. To do solar on your commercial building in PG&E territory. And I can tell you, we're seeing massive arrays. If you look at, Google Maps, an aerial of the city, and starting in present day and go back a couple of years and look at those same buildings, you'll see a world of difference in terms of how many have done solar on their roofs in enormous arrays. And I think we tend to forget about those because you don't really see them. When you drive by, but they're there.
I'm wondering if there's I'm wondering if that's an area to communicate to the residents, because I know I converted to solar and I noticed a lot more since I converted other rooftops that converted. It might be good information that says, hey, X% of the city seems to be moving here. Kind of a peer pressure type of thing, or just saying it's okay, other people are doing it. See if you could do it too. Talk to your neighbors, maybe get some information. If they moved to solar, how could they afford it? What was the mechanisms?
Well, and that's exactly why we're doing these climate champion interviews to get real world information from real people about what they have done and what benefits it has given them, so that you're getting it straight from the horse's mouth. It's not a sales pitch from a solar company or even me or Seamus or Paulina telling you it's a great idea. This is one of your neighbors, a fellow community member.
I was thinking of that. I was looping it back to that thinking that are your solar champions, some of them, the businesses who are putting solar on it or who are, installing energy efficiency technologies. That would be great to highlight them because, all businesses want advertisement, right? And so if they see other businesses see some of them getting highlighted because they're kind of moving ahead with that in the same way. Yeah.
And well, there's no limit on how many folks we can talk to get their stories. Residents and businesses. Seamus, what was the one that you worked on with that one company over there? Because the solar is just one thing. There's a whole number of other things. Seamus, what was the other one we did?
Yeah, so we recently worked on a project for clean energy. They are a renewable compressed natural gas provider, and they get their natural gas from dairy and wastewater and all these other renewable sources. But they expressed that a lot of local distribution companies in the city are looking to transfer their existing diesel fleet over to renewable natural gas as an interim before ultimately, hopefully going to electric. And we also have seen a few of our warehouses down in Southport that are looking to convert their fleet to electric. So clean energy is, I think, what David was talking about.
Seamus, that climate interview, that one company that you and Elijah found.
There is, yeah. We had a interview. Our consultant interviewed Origin Materials. You might have seen on the local paper. But they're basically they are carbon. They put their carbon into replacing plastic. So instead of a plastic fork or knife at a fast food restaurant, that's actually carbon that's been taken out of the atmosphere or some other means. Origin Materials is the company that we interviewed.
Yeah, and they're right here in West Sacramento, and they're doing, we have some really cool companies that are doing some very advanced work. I mean, solar is just the tip of the iceberg in many respects. We've talked to Nugget. We're going to be talking to Rayleigh's, and then residents. I want to go to Tony's Fine Foods, and I think they built still the largest array we have here in town. But we're also seeking other businesses that may have done some other things in the areas of water conservation, other areas. The solar is kind of the obvious one, but there's so many other things that our residents and businesses can be doing, and we do want to celebrate those who have chosen to do whatever it is they have done, and for whatever reason, because all that matters and all that helps.
David, this is actually really.
Are the interviews being recorded?
Is
it like a video production?
We may offer that if anyone really wants to go that far. We're, and some folks are a little more forthcoming with some of their information than others. But we at least want to get their stories out there, even if it's a John or Jane Doe kind of thing, or the Acme Company. We want folks to know that these are real things that real businesses and residents right here in West Sacramento are doing, and hopefully others can do similar things.
And we're still looking for other local community members to feature in our cap. So if you know of anybody or any local businesses that are doing above and beyond for getting to carbon zero, let us know.
Any more questions?
I just want to emphasize, so the stories are great, but one of the things I earlier said was, if you had the data points, graphs, visualization to say, this is the direction we're headed, you're going to need it anyway to see how your plan is going. So if you have a place you could encapsulate all your metrics and show the city and yourself, which way are we headed? That'll inform you and future commissions. Do we need to ramp up? Can we celebrate? What should we do? And inform the citizens as well that says, yeah, there's an increasing amount of activity in this area, and your neighbors are part of it. So not just stories, but also the data is showing that it's trending in the direction you want.
Yeah, no, I'd like to have that. If we're up to me, I'd have something like that on the front page of the city's website.
Yeah, like a dashboard.
Yep, dashboard, exactly. Everyone could see it right there, almost in real time. So that is absolutely something we're going to strive for, because everybody needs to know this. You know, this is not just an academic, you know, exercise. This is very real and very serious.
So do you think that's likely, or is that a resource constraint?
Well, we actually had already worked with a company at the outset of this that actually builds those dashboards. And so, you know, we weren't able to bring them on, you know, at the outset, because we really need them more at the back end. But I still have their number, and I'd still love to do it. I've seen what they've done for other cities. Breaks it down, makes it very easy to digest in a, you know, a fairly short, you know, review of it. But all the gory details are there too. If you really want to do a deep dive, it's all there. But
Nice.
you know, I love the dashboard through the whole COVID thing. The dashboard the county's had up has been fantastic, and I would love to do something similar for climate.
I had a comment. I noticed in the materials that you sent, there's a lot of mention of workforce development. And in my work too, that's a big topic, workforce development and education. And one of the things that we're looking into is actually partnering with the local high schools. So have you guys looked at maybe, you know, how like River City has a culinary arts academy, maybe something along those lines for, you know, zero emission technology, automotive shop or something like that. That would also really help tie in the education piece to the students who have parents are also in that kind of field and maybe can.
I think that's an excellent idea. You know, we do have a lot of partnerships in education, like through the Home Run program, and, you know, where kids are guaranteed on internships. We also need to have companies in town that do those kind of things so that kids can get internships there and hopefully be inspired, you know, in this particular career field. Workforce development, in my view, is one of the biggest things we can do toward resiliency. If folks are mostly worried about being able to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head, they're not going to be able to dedicate too much energy toward being resilient. So we have to help on all fronts on this, but I think that's another excellent idea.
Just to follow Commissioner Choi, with that culinary academy, and you mentioned earlier the restaurants converting them. Maybe one of the incentives you could ask them is to learn how to cook on induction stoves. That's what I switched over because I got solar and I have gas and I need to reduce the gas. And I said, well, let me get an induction stovetop, and it's just a portable one and it works out pretty good. And I use the less gas.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of something that someone has done that we would want to encourage others to explore doing that too. You know, that's, you know, a lot of folks, they love their gas stoves no matter what, and I get that. But so hopefully if they can't convert those, they can hopefully reduce gas usage somewhere else. I myself replaced my gas water heater with a heat pump, you know, hybrid heat pump water heater. I love the thing. It almost pays for itself. You know, things like that. But I was fortunate enough to have the means to do that. Not everybody, you know, does that, especially if you don't own your own home. So we have to be mindful of those things too.
Any more questions?
If you don't have to answer this, David, but ballpark on how much that costs?
The water heater?
Uh-huh.
It was about, the water heater itself was about $1,200. And then I had to pay an electrician to put the circuit in. That was about another $300. So the whole thing was less than $2,000.
Less than $2,000. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are things you can buy pretty much off the shelf, even at like a Lowe's or Home Depot. You don't have to go to some, you know, fancy far-flung place.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David and Seamus. It was really informative. And thanks for taking all of our questions. Appreciate it.
No, thank you all, Commission, very much. This was very helpful for us tonight. And we'll look forward to being back before you, hopefully in a few months.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, general administration function part 2. So the Environment and Utilities Commission's next regular meeting will be on June 14th, 2021. Do we have any reports from our city staff?
Thank you, Chair Cardano. I just wanted to remind everybody, one of the items that was listed in Seamus's presentation was our Earth Day event. That is this Saturday. It's a virtual event from 10 to 11. Part of that event will also be a presentation on the climate action plan and an opportunity for some Q&A around that. So I was thinking that maybe as a follow-up to the meeting, I can send that flyer along with those other links from that slide, with our climate action plan website and places that where you can register for that, the 20th workshop, and then also have access to the survey that will be posted, I think effective 14th, if I remember correctly. So I'll send out flyer and that other information. That way you have that in an email, so you have all the access and links you need.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right. Anything else? No?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh. Is that it, Paulina?
Yeah, sorry, that was all I had.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. So do we have any future agenda item requests by the Environment and Utilities Commission? No? Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Chair. Paulina, maybe you know if this data is available, but I was wondering, kind of along the lines of the conversation we were just having, if the city has any information from Waste Management about how the amount of waste and recyclables and compost picked up from residences may have changed sort of pre-pandemic to now during the pandemic, as people have shifted to working from home. So that's one thing. And then I've been hearing a lot. So there's currently an executive order that prevents water shutoffs during the pandemic, and water utilities, larger water utilities have been seeing issues with arrearage. So customers not able to pay their bills or not paying their bills because of many reasons, primarily because there's been a lot of impacts due to COVID-19 with people's work and incomes. I was wondering if the city has any data on sort of utility bills and how the city utilities are doing in terms of the bill payments.
Yeah, I can definitely at the next meeting during the staff report provide some data on the increase in trash. That they have noticed that they've mentioned that there was also a really large increase with the bulky waste collection program. A lot of folks that were working from home decided to do remodeling and other home projects. So it's time to clean out the garage. So yeah, there was a significant increase. So I can bring that back at the next meeting and report some information about the difference in tonnage from pre-pandemic to current. And then I'll also check on the utilities. The city doesn't, we've never shut off for non-payment. We are the water utility. We have historically lien properties for non-payments. I do know that utility billing has completely eliminated all late fees during this time, but I can find out if there's any data about increase in non-payments. I think that's what you're trying to get at, right? Have we seen an increase in people not paying the bill?
Yes. Yeah. And I think we want to be conscious that everybody needs water. As you
Right.
mentioned, the city doesn't shut off water, which is great. But once the pandemic's over, it may be an issue for sort of city finances.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, I can get more data on that. And I think that and it'll have to be a lump because we don't separate out water as you pay all your utilities. So if somebody's not paying, it's likely they're just not paying their bill completely. So it would be impact to both our water, sewer, and refuse utilities. Yeah, I can do that back next meeting or next meeting.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so if there isn't anything else, we are going to adjourn. Ben, take a vote on it when we're doing it via
I'll do a roll call vote to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Are we adjourned?
We are adjourned, yeah.